Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Mozart's Don Giovanni, which was part of the Berlin Opera Group's repertory, and which I saw at the Theater Pfefferberg. The conductor was David Wishart, the production was done by Kelsey Busha, the producer was Ataya Speta, the graphic designer was Stephen Karanak, and the lights were handled by Christian Scharer. This review of Don Giovanni is dedicated to today's Donna Anna, Maria King, who I first saw and met at a music video shoot about 2 years ago. So, Maria, if you're watching this video, I hope you enjoy this review of Don Giovanni, and I hope you have a very pleasant evening. With that said, let's get on to what I thought about the production. Now, given the fact that Theater Pfefferberg is a pretty small theater, the sets were kind of limited, as in we only have a backdrop of what is basically clockwork on one side, and on the other side is a backdrop of a cemetery. This is also to show that the people behind this production of Don Giovanni basically set the action to the more steampunk era, with characters dressing up in all of these steampunk getup. Like we have some of the women wearing slightly revealing outfits, and some of the men being in very wonderful pieces of clothing. And I also have to say that the costumes looked pretty elegant on each of the singers. So I'm not going to mince words here. The production and costumes were quite simple, and even though they're not completely elegant or completely extravagant, there is a little bit of uniqueness and beauty to be found in some of the moments. And now we get to the singers, starting off with today's Don Giovanni, who was sung by the young baritone Marcelo de Souza Felix. I thought he sang the role well. He had a very fine-sounding voice, and he had a dashing and tall stage presence. However, if you know me, I always prefer it when either a bass baritone or a basso cantante sings Don Giovanni. The likes of Nikolai Gyaurov, Cesare Siepi, Giorgio Tozzi, and even that of Jerome Hines. In terms of Mr. De Souza Felix's portrayal of the Don, I thought he was able to be ideally dashing, kind of mischievous, and kind of devilish as a character, even though I do miss Gyaurov's more demonic portrayal of the Don, and even that of Siepi's really noble sounding portrayal, or even that of Samuel Raimi's equally dashing and equally virile portrayal of Don Giovanni. But I still have to give a good amount of credit to Marcelo de Souza Felix for doing a fine job in this particular role. He was able to sing this role decently, and he was able to act the part quite well. And I'm sure that there is a very fine future for Mr. De Souza Felix in a lot of the cavalier baritone roles, like Valentin from Faust, and even that of Mercutio from Romeo et Juliet, and even that of Enrico from Lucia di Lammermoor. Who knows? The possibilities for this young lyric baritone are quite endless. Singing the role of his sidekick, Leporello, was Alex Adams-Leytes, and I thought that he was able to portray Leporello quite well, given the fact that he is a buffo singer. And while I thought his voice was really good in terms of these buffo parts, there were times that I found his voice to be kind of nasal in certain areas, but when he had to sing full voice, that's where I thought he really shone. I don't know who on earth told him to sing like that, but when he sang some parts with a nasally voice, it just didn't sound too appealing to me. But I still have to give him some high marks for his portrayal of Leporello, and of course his chemistry with Mr. De Souza Felix's Don Giovanni, in which they were able to play off pretty well off of each other. Then we go to the Commendatore, who was sung by Alexandru Onea, And while I thought that his voice was rich, round, and really focused on all the registers, it just didn't really grab me as a true basso profondo. I probably would have loved to have more earth-shattering voices like Gottlob Fricke, Kurt Böhme, or even that of Josef Greindl, and I'm sure that I would have loved to have a true basso profondo whose voice and presence would have made the earth shook. But I still have to give a good amount of credit to Mr. Onea for his fine musicianship and, of course, that towering presence that he managed to give as the commendatore, and he did his role quite well, even though it's a pretty thankless part. In terms of Volker Nietzsche's Don Ottavio, I thought that he was okay. He was not the best, nor was he the worst performer. He was, simply put, sort of the weak link, because there were times I felt like his voice lacked ardency, fire, passion, and a good amount of virility that I would expect in any tenor singing Don Ottavio. He did sing all of his notes pretty well, but I'm sort of missing that warm timbre. I'm missing that overall sense of wonderful musicianship with tenors like Nikolai Gedda, Fritz Wunderlich, Alfredo Kraus, Luigi Alva, and even Stuart Burroughs and Jerry Hadley. I'm sort of missing that very warm timbre in his voice. And I'm sure that he's still quite young, and I'm sure that in a few years' time, he will be a lot better than he is. As for now, he's only okay, but his voice was a little bit on the frigid side, even though he did sing everything quite well. Eric Peterson's Mazzetto was tall and really handsome. He had a very dashing figure on stage, and of course, his lyric baritone voice was always a welcome treat. But the show really belonged to Maria King, who sang Donna Anna. The moment I heard her sing this particular role, I was completely sold with her performance. She was so physically agile on stage, like a gazelle. She used her slim and sleek body to her advantage to portray this tough role, and she sang everything wonderfully. She had superb musicianship. She was spot on in all of the notes. Her coloratura in Non Mi Dir was superb, and she was the absolute star of today's Don Giovanni. She basically shone like bright platinum, not only as a musician, but also as an overall actress. Then we go to Donna Elvira, who is sung by Lisa Newill-Smith. And while I thought she had a lovely voice, which was expressive and had a very gorgeous timbre, there were times I found a little bit of her coloratura work in Mitradi to be kind of choppy, and they were not really that even in certain areas. But what more can you expect? She also had to play off of the chorus members who were also acting alongside her, which made her job even more difficult. And I have to say that her voice was decent overall. And I'm sure that she is also quite young. So in a few years' time, I'm sure that her voice will be a lot more polished, will be a lot more refined, but as she is right now, she has a good amount of potential. She was able to act the role of Donna Elvira very well as sing this part with a fine voice, which does need a fair amount of polishing here and there, but there is a lot of potential with this young lyric soprano. Faustine Demones was wonderful as Zerlina. With her silver tones and her gorgeous light lyric soprano voice, she was able to make Zerlina a charming character. So overall, the singing was decent, but the absolute standout among the singers was Maria King as Donna Anna. And special kudos also has to go to the chorus members Maria Franceschini, Marco Ordovas Guillen, Daniel Nicholson, Sachel Beck, William Baugh, Caitlin Bork, Camila Riva, and Samantha W. Peterson for doing fine jobs as the sort of Greek chorus who also represent the 7 deadly sins. You guys were absolute pros, and you definitely made this afternoon really fine. And the conducting and the harpsichord playing done by David Wishart was solid, even though there were a few reservations in how he conducted the orchestra. There were times that he could not catch up with the singers, but despite all that, he managed to pick up the speed really well, and he managed to show a great amount of perseverance. There were also some cuts which I was not really a fan of because, if you know me, I love the music of Don Giovanni, and I feel like it's one of those operas that should never have any type of cuts whatsoever. But despite all that, I still thought that he did a fine job with leading such a small orchestra, and of course, the orchestra players who were violinist Katarina Bernard, cellist Sofia Cecalina, flautist Jane South, clarinetist Noam Carmen, and keyboardist Janis Janopoulos. They were all really good musicians, and I'm sure that they will definitely shine much further in the years to come. So overall, this was definitely a decent afternoon for watching Don Giovanni. And like I said before, out of all the singers, Maria King was the absolute star. And for those of you who saw this particular production of Don Giovanni, what'd you think of it? Did you like the production even though it was pretty simple and very limited? Did you feel like Maria King stood out of all the singers? Or did you feel like there was someone or something that just didn't really hold up? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in much later for my review of Mozart's Die Zauberflöte live from the Metropolitan Opera House. So until then, good night everybody.